Hello everyone, it's your favorite Down Space here, and do you remember when everyone was talking about the Barbie movie? Both I was shocked that someone made a Barbie movie, ignoring all the ones I made before it, and about whether its plot was good or bad, and its political messaging and all that jazz. Yeah, do you remember all that? Yeah, well I remember it too. The thing is, I didn't go see the movie, really. I just didn't. Like, I heard people talk about it, I heard people talk from all different angles and sides and everything, but I never saw it myself, so I avoided talking about it, because I try to be, relatively fair when I review or discuss something. I try to have an understanding of what I'm talking about. Yeah, well, I actually got around to seeing it a few days ago, and so I'm kind of ready to give my 2 cents on the movie. So was it good? Was it bad? Well, we're going to find out in my super late discussion of the Barbie movie. Now, right out of the gate, the plot, really, like the objective plot, like if you look at the story itself, it's just a mess. It feels like 5 different movies that were cobbled together, and things that just do not make sense. But there's tons of things I could pick at point that don't make a whole lot of sense. Like, why do the Borg executives come to the Barbie world when they really do nothing for the story outside their one scene in the real world? Why is the real world doesn't feel any different than the Barbie world, minimizing the difference between the two of them? Why do characters seemingly have random shifts in their personality or their motives at the most random of times? Like, it just doesn't make sense. And even character arcs just baffle me. Like, okay, so we got the main Barbie herself, and she ends, like, the first part of the movie, she's trying to find a way to fix herself so she can go back to being perfect Barbie, and then by the end, she's going to the human world, which is I've seen this plot line before. It was in Enchanted, and it was done way better there, because in Enchanted, they gave her reasons. They showed her being happy in the modern world, so it was fine for her to live. They explained why. It's a very common trope, someone goes to this other world trying so they can go back to their normal life, but ends up staying in the magical world, or in all cases, normal. It's a very common plot point. The problem being here is that there's never given a reason why she would do that. She just something at the end about wanting to be the one who creates things, but that literally comes out of nowhere. Like, we never get any idea at all that she has any desire to be creative, and it just comes so out of left field, like it came out from another script of the movie. And it just baffles me. And even within the movie, other parts of the movie, she's very bland as a character. I know that's kind of the point, because she's, the perfect Barbie where she has to stand out. But really, like, you're a main character. You're supposed to stand out a little bit and not feel like the literal piece of cardboard in the room. Seriously, if the movie was about weird Barbie, it would probably be a lot better. But then we get to Ken. Oh, Ken. Was he Ken enough for this movie? No, he was not Ken enough for this movie. Or he was, or maybe he was too much or too little. I don't know. Because, like, I can't tell. I guess they want us to be sympathetic for him. But I think they did it too well for some, and kind of me, where you kind of realize that his life and the other Kens suck. Like, I won't go as far as to say he's the good guy of the movie, because realistically, we have such a poor understanding of how the Barbie world works either before or after Ken's takeover, that it's really hard to say. Although I'm not inclined to say that Ken's created a perfect utopia for both Ken and the Barbies, like some people said. But it's kind of hard not to blame Ken for being obsessed with the patriarchy, quote-unquote, when literally his life is to be a servant slave-ish. I mean, realistically, that's what the Ken's lives are. Doing things for Barbie, pretty much, with zero autonomy. Like, if it's supposed to, like, we'll get into maybe some political thoughts later, but ultimately, like, Ken's life just sucks, so you can't really blame him, but he's also kind of the antagonist, the villain, too. I mean, like, realistically, it's just hard to tell. And the ending just for Ken's arc makes no sense. So, like, we get this whole thing where after Ken is defeated, don't ask me how the court system, and the whole scene makes no sense because that's another can of worms. But, like, so the whole thing I said before is that Ken needs to realize that he's going to live for someone other than Barbie. And then the realization of the movie is that he lives only for Barbie, and all the Kens live only for Barbie. That's the only thing, that they live for their Barbies, which is kind of weird, and a very weird character arc, because that's basically where all the Kens started, was living for their Barbies and having no real life of their own, and that's where they end. But the message is that's a good thing, and it gets even worse when you realize that the Kens can't be happy without their Barbie, and then Barbie up and leaves the main Ken, literally to another world, so by that logic, he can never be happy. Do you see why? Do you see why this doesn't really... You see why I feel like there's several scripts going on here? And as for, like, the real people, like the mother and her daughter, they're just there. Like, they're okay, not really bad, though they do treat the husband/father kind of mean, which is kind of sad. But, And it's like, I feel like they could have easily been the main characters of a different version of this movie, where it's about their, like, issues with society or the problems they have to deal with or that kind of thing. But instead, it ends up just being about, like, it could have been like Barbie comes to help them somehow or something. I don't know. I feel like that could have also been a better version of the movie, but whatever. And just overall, as a plot and character study, it's just not well put together. But that was only half of what people talked about. The other half was the pseudo-political elements of the movie. So how does that pan out? Now, this is probably where you expect me to say something like, this is like right-wing propaganda, or this is liberal propaganda, or this is right-wing conservatism shown in movies that's good, or liberal, like, progressivism that's shown in movies that's good. And I'm sorry, if you expect me to give you some kind of, like, this movie is either right or left wing kind of thing, you're just not going to get it, because I don't think it is. I don't think this movie is a terribly political movie most of the time, and when it is, it doesn't make sense. Like, there's so much that just doesn't add up correctly if you try to look at this movie for any kind of political lens. Like, I can understand to a degree that the writers probably were including, like, some kind of, like, pseudo, like, leftist talking points to the point I think that's what they were kind of trying to go for. But once again, the movie is so poorly put together that even I'm not certain about this. And regardless of what the intent of the writers was, the actual movie itself is just kind of a mess. Like, on the one hand, you want to think, oh, it's propaganda against men. It wants to be sexist to men because of how the Kens are stupid and dumb, and every man in the movie is stupid and dumb. But then they also make them super sympathetic by the fact their lives suck, and then they point out that they have feelings and they should have their own lives. But then they also turn back around to then having to be that they only live for the Barbies, so they have no reason to exist outside of that. And so it's like, is it, like, if some people have tried to think it's supposed to be a metaphor how women were treated in the past, but even that doesn't make sense. And then you get other things where it's like Ken's takeover is supposed to be this villainous thing, but yet, I mean, I still think if you were looking at it from an objective perspective outside of the movie, like, you could free roam this area, there'd be more like the Barbies not having anything they could do of their own or something, but yet it's still an oddly positive place half the time. It has a lot of decent perks, at least for the Kens, and even the Barbies don't seem to be in a super bad position, but as we do see in the movie, we know that the Kens can also seem positive when their lives suck too, so it's hard to tell. But then you get other things where it's like, but it muddies the water, it muddies it, that to make it hard to tell if it actually had as a political message. So once again, I think the writers had a political message, or perhaps there was like several teams in the writing room with different ideas for the political messaging, but overall it just doesn't come across in this movie with anything coherent. So I don't want to, I'm not going to say this is a movie for the right, a movie for the left. It's just nothing. It has bits, but nothing that makes sense in any kind of coherent way. This is almost a perfect example of why politics shouldn't be put in media for no reason, because it so clearly damaged some of the movie. In a few bits, I can tell. I don't know if it's what I call that truly destroyed the movie, or or it was just kind of like a little icing on the cake of it not being a very good film. But overall, I do really think that this is a great example of why you can have political themes and stories, but they actually need to make sense within the story and should be well thought out rather than just haphazardly thrown together, because then you get a mess like Barbie where nothing makes sense. But overall, that's just my opinion. How many of you have also seen the Barbie movie? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because honestly, I just don't have a whole lot, because I think the movie's too much of a mess to have any. But like I said, I'd love to hear what you think. Please like, comment, subscribe. If you don't like, dislike, and tell me why I suck. But either way, I will see you all next time. Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.